Hi guys, I've been asked a question which I thought was pretty good. Because it was asked via PM rather than an open channel, I'm not going to mention any screen names, but the question was this. I have been thinking if I should buy a cheap server off eBay. Could you make a detailed video on reasons to get a server? I'm going to restrict my terms of reference here. I'm going to restrict to domestic rather than commercial or enterprise, and home environment rather than people who have got garages, cellars, secret underground bunkers full of server racks and cooling. Yeah. There are probably going to be more reasons than I can cover myself. All I can really say is the things that I've come across over the years, and some of which have varied at different times, so it's really individual choices that determine whether you should get a server. But reasons, there are quite a few, and also there are various reasons for choosing different operating systems to run on a server, and how much money you should spend on the configuration of a server depending on what you want to do. One key reason to get a server is for central information storage. In previous PC days, I mean even in the 90s, I was trying to build servers and using multiple hard drives to act as one large hard drive. RAID all figured in my life from nearly about 20 years. It's been one of my focuses, for want of a better word. One of those reasons was information. Typically on a PC you can wind up with the operating system, your program files and your data files. It's quite a lot to have on a hard drive, and if you start getting to multiple machines, what then happens is you wind up with multiple copies of those files on different machines, different versions of files on different machines, and it gets one central repository for files means that the structure is a bit cleaner. As you'll know, with Windows XP and Unix/Linux, you'll have home directories for the particular user where your personal files go. So trying to keep those files separate has been a key thing of using computers for quite some time, and going for a server just takes that to the next step, that if you're having multiple machines, it makes it easier. It also makes it easier from the workstation maintenance type of thing. What I mean by that is typically when you rebuild some workstations, depending on how you've partitioned them and how you've configured them in the first place, if the operating systems need a refresh now and then, they can get clogged up with software that you've installed and deinstalled and left remnants and all the rest of that jazz, and it's just good practice to reformat the hard drive and put the OS on it again. Having to get all your personal files off the hard drive before you do that, it all adds to the rebuild process time. So keeping a client nice and lean and spending time to go through your files and sort them onto a server or delete them is good housekeeping from a number of reasons. One of those is, how many of us are guilty of just copying files, doing this, that and the other, and you wind up with a collection of files and heck. You then have the arduous task of sorting through them. If you try and keep on top of them, it helps, and having a server that you know that you've got to put files to helps you sort of do that task on an ongoing basis. It's just good housekeeping, pretty much. And also keeping the clients nice and thin means that you can put your money on better performance storage on the local machine rather than bulk. So it helps on the client side because you haven't got to store that much. You can be a bit smarter about where you're putting your money. Also, it can help with one of the nasty things that's coming out these days is ransomware. Something gets on your machine through a bit of browsing, tainted advert, whatever. Before you know it, it's torn through your hard drive, corrupted all your files. How you configure your server. I mean, some of these things will, well, they're now getting to the point where they will jump systems. Once they're on one system, they will go off through the LAN and hunt for other systems to infect. And they will do that before even announcing that they're on your machine. Before you know it, your entire network, any machine on there, has been encrypted. Great. To that point, air-gapped storage is great. You know, USB hard drive, which you plug in now and then and back up to, or pretty much better still, 2 USB hard drives, and do it on alternate times, because some of this time is now time delayed. They know that people are taking backups, so they're encrypting the stuff and then sitting there for ages and wait for people to have done backups. So by the time they strike, your backup's already nobbled as well. So how you configure the server, what operating system you have on it, and how you access the files on it is pretty important. Obviously, one of the ways that I do it is a chunk of the resources. And by the way, your core operating system on your client is no defense. Whether it be Microsoft, Linux, Apple, they're all getting hit these days. Typically, my server is a fork of OpenSolaris called OpenIndiana, and there's not much that will hit that. The Sun engineers, when they designed Solaris in the first place, designed it with security from the ground up. So it does things like, well, you want a service on it, you've got to enable it. You know, there's a lot of services which are shut down, particularly to close down vectors. So it starts from a secure position and then you open up, rather than starting with vulnerabilities and then you close them down, which is a very good philosophy, I thought. So it's OpenSolaris rather than one of the more common variants. Oh, sorry, OpenIndiana. Not very many attack vectors out for it, and consequentially, because it is slightly different, code base won't run. So even if a virus does manage to get on there, the code hopefully won't run. It also doesn't allow root, even if it's got the right password. It won't allow root to SSH on. You've got to log on as another account and then use an SU to root. There's other little bits like that. Not only that, the shares that are published are mostly read-only. There is one personal area where I can write to, but most of it is read-only. And if I want to write to those areas, I've specifically got to open up a pipe which gives me read-write access. Those sorts of tactics, yeah, they are a little bit of a bind, but you know, it's only a matter of time before even I get hit. I mean, I don't think I'm immune. It's all a matter of protection against convenience, really. And most of those areas I don't write to very often. It's a case of organising your data, really. So that's another reason. You can't typically enact that kind of protection on a local client. And that's a kind of protection which isn't easy to enact on USB hard drives. Typically I find that putting stuff on a server helps with organisation. I'm more of a mind to put specific files in specific locations rather than just dump it in the downloads directory and, oh, I'll sort it later. So it does sort of help on housekeeping. It pushes me to just be a little less lazy. And of course, with the server design, you can build in some resilience. As well as having RAID on the server, I don't need RAID on the client. You know, if the operating system goes west, I haven't lost that much, provided that I'm relatively rigorous about copying files off. I won't lose that much. But whereas I can put the money behind performance on a client, on a server I can put it against resilience. I can use slower spinning Rust drives rather than fast SSDs, which means I can get more storage on there for my buck. Because I can do that, I can then use RAID solutions, which gives me resilience, and when it comes to a backup, it's all in one place. I've got a toaster drive which allows me to put in an external drive. I can just put it in there, run a backup script, and all my data is copied off to the hard drive. One process. I haven't got to go around the laptops, the mobile phones, the PCs, the whatever, to drag little bits of data off there. You know, it's all in one location. It's easier to take an offline backup. So, yeah. It also helps on other strategies. Like, okay, I do have some surge protection for my PCs and game servers, but I can put the majority of my UPS money behind just making sure that that key server stays up and shuts down cleanly, because that's the critical stuff, the data. There have been a few cases over the years when I've wanted to reorganize my data storage, particularly some of the music stuff. When I was doing a lot of music creation with mod files, Scream Tracker, the rest of that jazz, there were subdivisions, and now I just want to reorganize that category because it doesn't really work very well right now. But in order to do that, I'll have to re-go through all the backup scripts and automatic scripts that back those things up, and it does become a bit harder. There are some downsides to using a server, which means you're then stuck to the LAN speed. The files are no longer local to the client, so therefore they take a little bit more time to access. Particularly some things like files which are going to be needed quickly, as in they've got to stream fast. So you tend to wind up having to put a bit of money behind maybe 100 megabit Cat5e may not be it, and you got to amp it a little bit to gigabit Cat6 cables. The Cat6 cables, yeah, they cost a bit more, and a gigabit core switch, yes, costs a bit more. But the majority of motherboards these days are actually coming with gigabit network cards on them. Okay, some are better quality than others. Haha. But pretty much it's not as much money as it used to be these days. The design for domestic, I've deliberately gone for the HPs that I went for. You'll find the video, if you just look for HP through the channel, you'll probably find the server build. Either here or on your Linux Live channel, because many of the servers you get off eBay, you know, they're commercial, they're enterprise. You plug one of those in, you switch it on, the fans are small, whiny things in order to fit them within 1U or 2U, so they've got tiny fans in there that go, wah! Oh boy. You do not want that, so choose your server carefully, you know, if noise is going to be an issue. If you're going to put it in a garage or a basement, yeah, be mindful of the heat in summer. Although these places are really cold in winter, they can also get baking hot in summer, so be careful of your placement location. And if you are going to do that, then longer network Cat6 cables are going to cost you a bit, so be mindful of that. Are there any other reasons to go for server? multiple device sharing, I think, is the last one. And yeah, being able to drag information to and from multiple devices keeps it common, and I think just helps on that score. I've got to admit, even with the heavier files that I chug around, gigabit networking is fine for me. I mean, okay, to transfer, once this is transcoded and then thrown up to the server, it'll take a good few minutes for that file to get transferred. But in length to the time, the viewing time, it can stream it off the server and play it with no issues. So it really does depend on what you're doing. I also find the server, because I've got a decent amount of storage space there now, a great dumping ground. Multiple USB drives. Yeah, I've got a number of friends who keep multiple USB drives, portable drives. Over the years, because of the cost issue, they haven't gone for that big, and also the failing issue. You get a nice big drive without any method of backing it up, and if that drive fails, you've got a problem because you've got no resilience there. But in order for cost and in order to cut down on having one large point of failure, they've wound up with a drawer full of small USB hard drives, USB memory sticks, small USB literal hard drives in cases, those sorts of things. And they have gone over to small server solutions in order to get rid of those. Now, if you go for the broadband routers, many of those are coming with USB mount points in order to serve DLNA media to the rest of the house and act as small servers. I would advise against that. The reason being is because those boxes are typically they're between you and the rest of the world. And if someone gets onto that box, they've got all your data. Yeah. Yeah, they haven't got to hack any further than that box to get access to everything. So if you're going to use those features, they're great for households that don't keep their data. They just want to put videos on there, small USB hard drive, plug it in and share it, or share a printer even. Good for that. But they've definitely got the downsides. Now, there are a number of larger server racks. There's a number of big names in the market, and they're basically just shelves for hard drives with a little bit of logic in them, aimed at the home user or the small enterprise, with automatic RAID configurations and all the rest of that jazz. I tend to stay away from those because they're proprietary. They may function great, but if something goes wrong, that's when you've got the problems. Typically, your best interface, if you're lucky, you've got a web interface that gives you a bit of detail. Otherwise, you're just stuck with flashing LEDs, and oh, it's a flashity flash. What the hell does that mean? Okay, then you've got to work out what's going on. So I tend to stay away from those. And also, some of these units are pretty expensive for what they are, So you might as well choose a decent machine to use as a server in the first place. Having said that, the HP N54L that I'm using, it's so cheap I've got two of the damn things. I've got an entire second server ready to rock. All I've got to do is transfer the hard drives and it's up and running. So if I hit a hardware failure, because I think pretty much the most the common things that are going to fail in those are the power supply and or the motherboard, because the capacitors are not the best. It's made by Foxconn, for crying out loud. Yeah, work out that risk factor for yourself. Having said that, this N54L has been going for a while now, and I'm pretty impressed, to be perfectly honest. So it's been worth putting in the effort to learn the operating system. Pretty much I had to learn Solaris from my job anyway, so it wasn't too much grief for me, and it was indeed on a course for work that I learnt about ZFS and all the rest of that stuff, which is pretty cool. And that's why I chose OpenIndiana as the operating system in the end. Yeah, it's a learning curve because it's Unix as opposed to Linux. There's a few differences. You've got to be aware of those. You've got to learn ZFS. It takes a bit of time to learn snapshotting and getting used to some of the other things. You wind up with slices rather than partitions. But I explain some of that in some of the videos, and I take you through it. There are some solid reasons for having a home server if you think you need it. For many people, I think that one or two better external USB hard drives is probably going to be all they need, especially if they're not doing work on friends' machines and dumping files while you rework on something, you know. Yeah. So to recap, with the right configuration, you can get better protection from your data against mechanical failure, against attack, if you configure it correctly. It gives a central resource for file storage, as opposed to having the same files across multiple devices. It can also promote slightly better housekeeping, because if you know you've got to transfer files there, it encourages you to have a good structure and actually go through things on a regular basis, which encourages slightly cleaner clients. It can help you take the data load off your client, so you can focus money on better performance hard drives rather than massive storage. I think those are the primary reasons. Some of the secondary reasons are, of course, it's another machine to look after. If you're going for a more advanced configuration, you've got another learning curve to tackle, and it's obviously going to be slower in data transfer than having the data on your local machine. I think that I've just about summed it up. Hope that helps. Bye for now.